Hello, welcome to the Sound of Science, the place where we deconstruct unscientific bogus and silly scams. Let's go get them. Hello. For a while now, I'm getting comments about my voice. Some of you don't seem to like my voice. Some of you think that my voice is not a human voice. I've had people in the comments section stating that my voice must be artificially created by software. But luckily, many of you have stated that you like my voice just the way it is. I even get comments from viewers who tell me they like my voice so much that they would even listen to me if I were to read from the phone book. Well, especially for you, I've been searching for a book that would be so pointless to read from, just like the phone book. And you already guessed what I'm going to read from. Of course, it's the infamous fairy tale book of the Bible. And I'm not only going to read from it, of course I will also comment on it. And because there's so much nonsense in the Bible, we'll have to read it bit by bit. Today we'll start off with the book of Genesis, chapter 1:1 to 1:5. So there we go. The book of Genesis, chapter 1:1. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth. Wait a minute. This is very problematic from the very first sentence on. The first sentence is not how language works. You see, if you introduce a character in a book, in this case the God character, you need to explain who he is before you're going to elaborate on what he does. A proper story about this God character would start off with, once upon a time, there was this guy called God. Now, the way Genesis 1:1 introduces him, it's as if the writer skips the introduction part of the story and jumps right to the part where the main character is already in the process of creating something. It's like starting the story of Cinderella with, in the beginning, when Cinderella was watching the clock, it was almost midnight. So, from the very first sentence, the Bible displays some very bad storytelling, apart from the whole creation thing. That really would need some evidence to support it. But let's continue to Genesis 1:2. The earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Wow, there is so much more to unravel. So what Genesis 1:2 tells us is that before God started to create stuff, other stuff was already there, because the Bible says that the earth was a formless void. So kind of an empty space without a specific shape. So space was already there. And apparently there were already waters. Then the question is, who created that formless void and those waters if God didn't do that? I always thought that Christians believe, based upon the Bible, that their God created the entire universe. But in the very first sentence of the Bible, it shows that God didn't create the entire universe, because there already was a formless void, and there already was some kind of waters. So the question is, who has been busy creating that stuff before God did it? Or did God create space and waters before the events in the book of Genesis? And somehow the Bible forgot to tell about that. What's going on here? And there is, of course, more problems on a conceptual level. A void is kind of an empty space. how can an empty space be formless? You can only have a formless empty space if the space around it is not empty. Otherwise, you couldn't make a distinction between that formless empty space and everything around it. So, was this formless void surrounded by something? Then who created that thing around that formless void? If God didn't do that, oh man, this book is not off to a good start. But let's continue with Genesis 1:3. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Now that's a classic phrase in history. Let there be light, and there was light. But I've always wondered why Christians don't seem to ask critical questions about that. Like, why does God need to speak in order to create stuff? I mean, he's supposed to be almighty. There's no need to talk while you do stuff that is so important. Or was it needed for God to talk in order to create that light? Is talking perhaps part of the mechanism of creation? And if talking is an essential component for God in order to create things, then is he perhaps talking to someone else who is sort of doing the hard work of creation for God? Would that be perhaps the same person who created the space and the waters that God himself says were already there before he started creation? Oh dear, this book is really poorly written. Let's continue to Genesis 1:4. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. So, my question would be, how did God assess that the light was good? Based upon what criteria did he decide that the light was okay? Was it like, okay, we've got some blue light, we've got some red light, we've got some yellow light. Oh, that's nice. We can now create a rainbow of light, and later on, rainbow colors might come in handy. And how did God separate light from darkness? And what does that even mean? You can't just physically put the light in a bottle or something. How would you separate that? And why? Maybe the answer is in Genesis 1:5, so let's continue. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Now that is so confusing. You see, if you want to have day and night, you would first need to have a star, and close to it a planet that revolves around its own axis, because without that, day and night do not exist. So how could God have thought that there was now night and day if there weren't even stars and planets yet? Questions. So that concludes my first reading session of the Bible. I hope you like it. If you think there are more odd things, more inconsistencies, and more poorly written illogical nonsense in Genesis 1:1 to 1:5, then let us know in the comments. We're all happy to hear your findings. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching.